Dark Things by David M. Humphrey, Sr. Continuing. Chapter 7, Dark Ways. "What's he doing?" said a whispered voice. "Shh! He's getting in touch with Mom's spirit," answered the second one, also whispering. "Well, it sure is taking a long time." "Shh! You can't rush things like this." "Shoot, for $75 an hour I can." "We've been here 20 minutes, and all he's done is mutter and mumble under his breath." "Shh, Floyd! He gave us the special. For a personal session like this, it's usually $200. What?" Someone's coming through to me. I see a woman, an older woman, wearing a green print dress. "It's Mama! I knew it!" "Oh, good Lord! Please! Floyd!" I'm getting a name. Mabel Rogers! Mabel Rogers! It's her! It's her! It's Mama! I told you!" "Oh, Flo, all he did was say one syllable, and you jumped on it like a chicken on a bug. You told him your mama's name." "Shut up, Floyd!" "Oh, I see we have an unbeliever among us," said a smoother-than-oil voice. "Sorry. Don't pay him no mind. Please, continue. My Aunt Lola told us you helped her to speak to her dead husband. So we came so you could help us." "Us?" her husband muttered under his breath. Flo Corey shot her husband a look that meant no dinner if you don't shut up, and he quickly adjusted his attitude. The medium, dressed in a green silk shirt, an expensive pair of black slacks, and an even more expensive pair of black shoes, said to the middle-aged couple in front of him, Come with me. I want to show you something." "And how much is this going to cost me?" Floyd Corey grumbled as he rose with his portly wife from the small round seance table where they were sitting. The gentleman led them through a set of curtains, and then several yards down a dark hallway covered on both sides with black drapes. He abruptly stopped and turned to his right. He held open a door for them and quietly ushered them inside. Floyd felt uneasy, but before he could say anything, his wife darted through the opening, no questions asked, and he felt obligated to follow her through. She seemed to trust this guy so much that she'd probably follow him into hell and back, Floyd thought to himself. The medium, Marcus Sebastian Talbert, smiled to himself as if at an inside joke. He closed the door behind them, locked it, and then walked past the suspicious blue-collar worker to get in front of the couple again and lead the way. They were immediately surrounded by more black drapes that hung like dark rain from the high ceiling. Suddenly, the couple realized that they were on a stage, and they emerged into an auditorium that was huge and echoed their footsteps like cannon shots as Marcus led them to the middle of the platform. The portly couple stood mesmerized and more than a bit self-conscious as they stood in the warm yellow glow of light situated high above them. Flo clutched her pocketbook to her bosom as if it would provide some protection from the mysteries of this canyon-sized place. Marcus turned in mid-stage on his heels like a dancer, looked at the surprised couple, and said with a majestic and flamboyant sweep of his arms, said, "So, what do you think?" Flo was the first to speak, while Floyd wandered slowly around in a circle gawking at his surroundings like a country bumpkin on his first trip to the big city. What is this place?" Flo asked in a reverent whisper. "This," said Marcus, is my new auditorium and studio. Back there, he said, pointing a magnificently manicured nail to the back of the huge theater-like room, shrouded in distant dark. Back there is all the equipment, technology, and cameras I need to take my message of hope and inspiration around the world. He had always wanted to help others, ever since he was a young man. As a child, he had brought home every stray cat he'd found in the neighborhood and nursed it back to health. There was something so rewarding in that, something wholesome in helping others. His mother, who was religious, always wanted to channel his efforts into and through the local church, but he had always felt drawn elsewhere. Unlike his mother, he felt there were many paths to God, and he had found his own unique way. And besides that, he had found his way to be the most lucrative. He turned and faced the couple again. He suddenly took a step toward Flo, who was Mrs. Flo June Corey, and took her left hand and kissed it. "I wanted to thank you, Mrs. Corey," he said with a most soothing voice and mesmerizing dark green eyes, "because it's people like you that make all of this possible. You make it possible for me to take my gift around the world." His lips slowly spread into a syrupy grin that would have made Satan proud. Flo Corey, unused to such attention, blushed and put her hand over his, patted it, and said, "Oh, it's nothing. I'm just so glad to help, because I knew that when my Aunt Lola told me how you had helped her, I knew you were the man I needed to talk to." He then turned his attention to Mr. Corey, and Flo reluctantly let his soft hand slip from hers. "So what do you think, Floyd? Mind if I call you Floyd? I wanted you to see this so you would know that this is no fly-by-night thing that your wife has gotten you into. A major network has contacted me and wants us to do daily broadcasts and a special show once on the weekends. We want to help reach as many people as possible, giving them the opportunity to speak with their dear departed loved ones." Floyd continued to look around, visibly impressed, but still suspicious. Think of it. There are no restrictions on the other side, by things like time or space. So those that have crossed over are able to see and hear and be aware of things that we cannot even dream of. Imagine having access to that kind of help from the other side. Find out whether your boss plans on giving you that raise or not, and if so, when. Find out what's going to happen in your future. Who will your son marry? Find out whether you approve or not, and if not, do something about it. Floyd stopped walking and looked at him with a quizzled look. Do something about it? What's the stock market going to do? How's your company going to do? Are there rough times ahead? Wouldn't you like to know how to avoid a calamity before it happens? Ever have a relative die and then another? And you know what they say, death comes in threes. Wouldn't you like to know if it was going to be you that was next, or someone else? And if it was you, wouldn't you like to be able to do something about it? Pass it on to someone else rather than you. Floyd was starting to sweat. He usually did when he thought a lot. He took off his gray suit jacket, tossed it over his arm, and wiped his face with a handkerchief. "All right," he said, looking at the handkerchief and folding it. "We just came in here to get a quick seance, a quick reading done. But I have to admit you do have a serious operation here. And I work in sales. That's how I make my living. So yeah, I would like to know what's going to happen and maybe have some things changed so that things would go a little smoother, shall we say?" So how much is this going to cost me? He looked at Michael directly in the eye. Michael knew he had him and smiled broadly, spreading his hands as he walked slowly up to Floyd Corey. That's the beauty of it, Floyd. It costs hardly anything when you compare it to the awesome benefit you receive. Listen, he said, placing his arm around Floyd's shoulder and walking with him. You'll have access to either myself or one of my personally trained staff members. These are people that I have personally introduced to their spirit guides, who will in turn guide you into a better life. Access 24 hours a day, including weekends. People you can trust. People you can ask questions about anything at all, and their spirit guides will provide the answers for you. Suppose I have a situation that I need began Floyd. Changed. You said that my spirit guides can help with that. Most certainly they can. They can arrange for circumstances, situations, and even people to be, shall we say, removed from being a problem to you. Okay, so how much is all this going to cost me? Well, that's the beauty of it, Floyd. We've made it affordable for everyone. Instead of paying some huge fee ranging in the thousands of dollars, we've eliminated all of that. You have? Yes. Well, all we ask for is your support and a small membership fee, only $100 a month, and everything we discuss can be yours. You'll make 10 times that in your first month with a new success that you'll enjoy in your business. How much would it be worth to you to know your competitor's next move, or to have an idea that will earn you a promotion to VP of Sales for your company? Whoa, priceless, said Floyd, his eyes glazing over with the thought of it. Yes, it would, wouldn't it? So, bang! A $5,000 studio light crashed to the floor in the back of the darkened auditorium suddenly. The glass fragments exploded across the floor and lay there in the darkness, twinkling like 1,000 stars in the sky of some distant galaxy. The loud and sudden noise came without warning. Everyone, including Talbot, jumped with surprise. Who is it? Who's there? Said Marcus, his voice suddenly gone cold and demanding. A strange and distant voice called back to him. I need to talk to you. Now. Marcus walked slowly forward to the edge of the stage, shielding his eyes from the bright light, trying to see into the darkness. Flo went to her husband's side and clung to him, feeling suddenly a little unnerved and slightly embarrassed for feeling so. I can't see you. What's your name? And what do you want? How did you get in here? I came to see you about 7 weeks ago. Introduce me to my spirit guide. I need his help. I need another seance. And I need it now. My name is Will Jefferson. Will Jeffries. Marcus Sebastian Talbot quickly dismissed the curious couple, and with a brief handshake and a small brochure on how to become Psychic Coalition International members, he sent them on their way, promising to get back to them later that night. Will Jeffries stayed in the shadows of the huge auditorium, watching until the couple left, ushered out by their polite but hurried host. Will carried with him a large, heavy brown sack. Talbot returned to the center stage, pretending to search his memory for that name. Jeffries, do I know you? He said. But Talbot remembered him well. He had never seen such a dramatic session before. The young black man had been ripe for plucking. He had found that when people are suffering their most devastating or traumatic events, that was the best time to introduce them to their spirit guides. Talbot had an intimate relationship with his own spirit guide that he strove to help others emulate. Talbot's own guide had commended him for his help and cooperation, for leading so many people to a new level of enlightenment. But he in turn had voiced the fact that he was only too glad to help, though the huge sums of money paid by some to talk with their dead relatives didn't hurt anything either. Talbot's spirit guide was George Washington. Always cordial, regal, stately, and ever the gentleman, he appeared in Talbot's visions, or actually sometimes in person, wearing the uniform of a Revolutionary soldier with a gold sword at his side. He was always helpful, patient, and courteous with Talbot, no matter how numerous or childish the psychic's questions might be. He personally assigned the various spirit guides to each of the psychic's customers. Now, here was a returning customer, a young man he had helped a number of weeks ago. He was eager to help the man make contact with his personal spirit guide again. And the third returning session fee would be nothing to sneeze at. Talbot walked behind the curtain on the near side of the stage and emerged struggling with a large round table. He carried it to the center stage and set it down there. He then motioned toward the darkness for Will to come up, though he still couldn't see even a shadowy image of the man. He returned again from behind the curtain a second time with 2 chairs that he placed on opposite sides of the table and then stood waiting. He remembered Will as a sad but handsome young man. He remembered him as a failing doctor who was deeply depressed over an abrupt turn of events that made him question his personal philosophy about life. The very first time Talbot had met Will Jeffries, he had offered to introduce Will to a spirit guide. Will had laughed it off, turning down his offer and saying he must have been crazy for coming in the first place, and abruptly left. But the spirits had a way of getting what they wanted. Thanks to Talbot's new assistant, Felicia, the following week, Will Jeffries had come back to see him after the apparent death and revival of one of Will's patients. Will requested his spirit guide's help in understanding such things. In addition, he requested help in dealing with the impending death of a close friend. The confused and searching doctor had been a man looking for answers to nagging questions that stabbed constantly, now at his heart and mind. Will had confided in Felicia, whom he had known for quite some time, that for the first time in his life he had an unexpected and incessant desire to go to church somewhere because of all these events. But Felicia had given him Talbot's card instead and raved about Talbot's psychic abilities, urging Will to come in and see the man once more, telling him that he could always go to church some other time. So, Will had come in to see the psychic the second time, a lost soul in need of a map of life and a spiritual guide to help him read it. Will Jeffries dropped the large sack he was carrying. It fell to the floor with a deep thump and a soft moan. He approached the stage, gradually emerging from the dark like a dreadful apparition from a Shakespearean play. Marcus Talbot felt something leap within him when he saw the man. A joy, excitement, a craving that he couldn't explain. It was a craving to hear news. But news of what? That he didn't know. Dr. William Jeffries approached the steps at the far end of the stage at a deliberately slow pace. He wore a dark green London fog coat. He moved tediously and purposefully, like a man in a trance. The coat was buttonless and inexplicably flapped slowly around the young doctor as if caressed and tossed by invisible winds, though the air conditioner was not on and not a single window existed in the auditorium. Under the coat, the doctor wore green scrubs and white floor-gripping hospital shoes that squeaked eerily on the freshly waxed hardwood floor of the stage. There was a deep silence that seemed to seep into the auditorium, filling every seat, covering every wall, hanging like the black drapes themselves, thick and smothering from the ceiling. Talbot noted with a tinge of uneasiness that Will seemed to float to him from across the stage as he slowly approached, though he could plainly see the man was walking. Try as he might, however, he could not shake the illusion or the shroud of fear that appeared to issue forth with it. As Will Jeffries finally emerged into the bright circle of light on center stage, he could see month-old bloodstains on Jeffries' filthy scrubs and a beard that teemed with things never meant to be near human flesh. Shocked, he noted that the man's unkempt hair moved and seethed with lice and tiny broods of maggots and other parasitic life. Patches of hair were gone in several places, and in his place were ticks, fat and egg-shaped, gorged on blood, their pincers gluttonously buried deep beneath the sore-filled scalp. The doctor's right hand was pus-covered and swollen beyond belief. A tattered brown rag that had once been a clean bandage covered it. Will Jeffries stood on the opposite side of the table from the psychic and leaned forward, the fingertips of his left hand resting lightly on the dark wood. Talbot gripped the table suddenly to keep himself from fleeing as he fought down the heaving of his stomach. How could anyone change so drastically in only a month and a half? The young man he met weeks ago was gone, and in his place stood a revolting figure that was so disgusting it entranced him with the staggering implausibility of it all. Will grinned evilly. "I lied," he said. Talbot's face fell. "Lied?" he squeaked. "Yes," Jeffries replied, fixing him with gray, murky eyes. "I didn't come here to speak with my spirit guide." "You didn't?" "No. I came to speak with yours." "What?" Now Talbot was terrified. This was getting out of hand. What would he do? The man was crazy, obviously. He had to get away. Where would he run to? "Did you hear me?" "Yes, I heard you," Talbot mumbled fearfully, jarred from his thoughts. He couldn't get away. The man was only 3 feet from him, and he would catch him in no time. Then, suddenly, inspiration struck him. His spirit guide. His spirit guide would help him. Yes, of course. "Yes, of course. I'll bring up my spirit guide for you," he said, as he sat down, then added in his mind, "and he will drive you and your filthy person from my auditorium." Jeffries licked his dry and cracked lips every few minutes, like a dog in heat. The tongue, thick with a coat of white mucus, sent shivers up Michael Talbot's spine. It was obvious that the man was controlled and manipulated by negative spirits. But why hadn't the man's spirit guide protected him from them? Talbot began the summoning of his own spirit guide, and he inwardly felt relief at the protection it would afford him. He felt confident that his spirit guide was at least equal to any evil spirit that was manipulating this poor man. He quietly prepared himself for what could turn out to be a battle royal. Geoffrey sat down across from him and stared. "Don't you want to hold my hand?" A deep and evil voice belched out at Talbot, and then laughed, a strange and unsettling laugh. It was the oddest thing that Talbot had ever heard. It was a deep, round belly laugh, with a high-pitched, almost girlish titter at the end. He wasn't about to hold the man's hand. He was no fool. He ignored the remark and began his summoning. A summoning of his personal, faithful spirit guide. "Sebastian," Geoffrey suddenly began to mock, his chin resting on the table. A trail of saliva dribbled from his mouth and crawled across the table toward the psychic. "Don't call me that," ordered Talbot. He hated his middle name. "Thank you for my new home, Sebastian." "I can't thank you enough," said the crazed man in a voice that didn't sound quite human. He laid his head down on the cool tabletop, sideways like a child, as Talbot watched him. And then Jeffries began to lick up his own saliva. Talbot had had enough of this. He hurried through his summoning, praying silently that his spirit guide would hurry and come. Suddenly, to his relief, he felt its presence. Without a word from Talbot, Jeffries jerked upright, ramrod straight, his head snapping left, then right, as if he sensed an unseen presence. "Yes, now we will see who is frightened," mocked Talbot, pointing an accusing finger across the table. "Now you have to deal with my spirit guide, and you and your negative energy, you have to leave. We're for the light, and we reject you." Geoffrey suddenly jumped up from the table, so quickly that his chair flew backwards and flipped off the stage. His head continued to snatch this way and that. He could feel it, feel the presence. Where was it coming from? Which direction? Now it was Talbot's turn to laugh, and he did. Finally, in the midst of the dark auditorium, a dim form like gray mist could be seen, forming in midair over the empty auditorium chairs. The form slowly swirled and took shape. A figure in a Revolutionary War uniform with a gold sword at his side could be seen walking toward the stage with long, slow, purposeful strides. The translucent figure walked up to the stage, stood stock still at the very edge, and stared malevolently at Will Jeffries. Marcus Sebastian Talbot opened his mouth to address his beloved guide and mentor when the madman Will Jeffries rushed at the ghostly apparition and fell at his feet. Michael watched in surprise as Jeffries greeted it with salutations and apologies and bowed deeply. "General Washington, this," began Talbot. "Silence!" roared the general at Talbot so loudly that the curtains shook with the refrain. Jeffries continued to grovel as the general looked at him and said, "What can you possibly offer by way of excuse for your dismal failure?" "My lord, Thulis, I have no excuse." But I will find the girl, Sleen and the others, already using the human host, Pit, to track her. I will join them immediately and put an end to this." "See that you do, for the sake of your own hide. You know the master is intolerant of failure." "And so am I," Thulis said with a particular venom. "Yes, Lord Thulis. I was regrettably delayed by an unseen circumstance. A meddlesome pest of a policeman, a photographer who fancies himself a detective. He tracked me, and I had to deal with him." "Is he dead?" "No, my Lord Thulis. I had no time to deal with him properly, so I had to bring him here. He is unconscious and bound." "Is he a believer?" "No, sire." "Then he is no threat. Leave him where he is. Leave him where he lies, and waste no more time." "Yes, sire," said Jeffries. Talbot was aghast. What was going on? They knew each other. Knew? They acted as if they were in cahoots with each other. And Jeffries, he responded to the general as if he had been a subordinate in the man's army. And who is in that sack that they spoke of? And who is Thulis? Suddenly, Talbot noticed that the conversation had turned to him. "My Lord Thulis, what about him?" Belinus said through the lips of Jeffries with a jerk of the head in Talbot's direction. The general's eyes turned red and luminescent, like blood on fire. He locked his eyes on Talbot, and they narrowed to satanic slits as the uniform he wore dissolved slowly away to reveal powerful but warped and deformed demonic muscle encased in sleek black leather, a V-shaped vest, and black breeks or pants. A slow grin like snake oil spread across his face, and short piranha-like teeth quickly bared themselves. "Don't worry about him. I have his replacement already. His usefulness to me has finally come to an end. Go, do your bidding, and leave him to me." "Yes, my Lord Thulis," answered his demented servant. The vocal cords were those of William Jeffries, but the deep and grating voice was that of Belinus, ruler and prince of legions. He turned and flashed a knowing smile to Talbot, and said with a frightening, diabolical grin, "Nice knowing you, Sebastian," and left. The auditorium was deathly quiet, and Marcus Talbot backed away as the general, turned demonic leader, approached him, walking on thin air. Who are you? And what have you done with my spirit guide? The forces of light are stronger than the forces of darkness, and we will overcome them," he shouted as he stumbled backwards toward the stage door exit. "That may be," said the apparition, relentlessly moving closer, "but you'll never see it. Do you know why? Because gray only looks like light to those who live in darkness." "Oh, help me! George Washington! Help me! Help me!" said Talbot. "There is no help for you, not in the names you call on." And he chuckled as Talbot's back thumped up against the wall next to the stage exit. Thulis stopped, alighted on the stage, and closed in upon the man until he was only a frightening 6 feet away. He cut his eye at the exit, then back at the psychic. The doorknob, and freedom, was only 3 feet from the man's left hand. Talbot stood flattened against the wall in sheer panic, whimpering and trying to remember every enchantment, summons, incantation that he could against evil spirits. Nothing worked. He glanced at the doorknob, his key to freedom. Go ahead. Try for it. I'll give you a sporting chance. Thulis lied. The psychic weighed the offer. Oh, I see, mocked the satanic prince. You can't make up your mind. Let me help you. Let's see who we can find to help you decide. Maybe your dead father, perhaps. The evil entity suddenly transformed itself into a stern man in his 50s, holding a pipe and wearing a gray smoking jacket, the spitting image of Marcus's father. Sebastian, try for the door, son, he coaxed, gesturing with his smoking pipe. You never know until you try. He grinned, then morphed back into his own form. Oh, still not convinced? Perhaps a visit from your dear departed mother will convince you. Thulis then morphed into the matronly and statuesque form of a woman in her 40s, impeccably dressed. She spoke in perfect English with just a hint of a Canadian accent. Now, Marcus, don't let this nasty old demon scare you, dear. You just listen to Mother. And you just run along now and get away, all right? Why are you doing this to me? All I ever wanted to do was help people, and yet you mock me and terrorize me. Why me? Sebastian was hurt, angered, shocked, and confused. The demon's mimicry of his parents had been exacting, perfect. Had the sessions he held with his parents over the past many years actually been with them, or this thing? Thulis laughed a deep, guttural laugh, an obscene noise that sounded for a moment like he was retching. I know what you're thinking, he said in mock pity. Was I really talking to Mommy and Daddy on the other side all those times? Or was it this ugly and repugnant thing before me? Ha ha! He howled suddenly with laughter, and without warning leaped at Talbot. The terrified psychic screamed and leaped for the door with a superhuman effort fueled by complete panic. Suddenly he had the doorknob in his hand when he felt fearsome claws like harpoons striking deep into his back, down to the spine. The pain was excruciating. Thulis wrenched him backwards to the floor with such sudden force that Talbot found the nails of his left hand torn and bleeding, and the doorknob itself still clutched in his fingers. Thulis flipped him into the air and slammed him face first to the floor with a demonic strength that shattered both cheekbones and the man's left shoulder. The entity lay on top of the bleeding man, then leaned down toward his left ear and snaked a hot, wet, sticky tongue deep inside to lick out blood and wax that oozed grotesquely from the impact, and then said to Talbot, "They're all me, you ignorant fool. From your dead mother to General Washington to Mabel Rogers this morning to the 6-year-old child you summoned from beyond the grave yesterday. everyone you have ever summoned and ever seen beyond the veil, they're all me. We have been around for thousands upon thousands of years, Thula said, smiling, and I've learned to mimic humans perfectly. Every speech pattern you have, every mannerism, every tone, every idiosyncrasy, every experience we watch, we study, we duplicate perfectly. You have yet to speak to a single dead relative, you idiot, he mocked and laughed again with a horrendous retching sound. I don't believe you. Do you think I care what you believe? What you believe doesn't matter to us, Sebastian, as long as it is not the truth. You lied to me, the psychic said through bleeding lips, then choked on the blood in his mouth. Does that surprise you? Thulis retched several times. Then feasted again on Marcus's blood. He then smiled and said, I'm going to do you a favor, Sebastian. Before I kill you, I'm going to tell you a secret. A secret you will remember for all eternity. But I worked for you. I helped you. Doesn't that count for anything? Sebastian bargained. We find it amusing that you who are made in the image of the Creator, a spirit, are so willfully ignorant of the true nature of spiritual things. Your assistance has been greatly appreciated, but you, like all humans, Sebastian, are like cattle, predictable, breedable, and abundant. You're willing to sell your souls for a little power, a little fame, a little pleasure, a little sex. Talbot tried to buy time. I never agreed to sell my soul. If I had known a mere triviality. Thulis interrupted. You're done here. I've already raised up Felicia to replace you. She is doing nicely, and like you, should be useful for many years to come. Talbot was desperate. His eyes searched for another way out, while his mind searched for anything, any excuse to keep Thulis talking. For in spite of the pain, every second of conversation, at least, was another second of life. But I thought your aim was to help people. No, Sebastian. That was your life's aim and mission. You were bleeding hard like your mother. Only when it came to spiritual things, she chose wisely. You picked the wrong side. Your absolute destruction is our life's mission, he said. And the single light that was high in the ceiling exploded the auditorium into pure darkness with the sound of Sebastian's dying scream.